Dr. Satan, the world's weirdest criminal. Written by Paul Ernst, told to you by Edward E. French. Episode 3, Dr. Satan. 3 miles away, in a windowless, black-draped room, a figure bent over a metal table in the attitude of a high priest bending over an altar. The figure looked like one robed for a costume ball, save that in every line of it was a deadliness that robbed it of all suggestions of anything humorous or social. Tall and spare, it was covered by a blood-red robe. Red rubber gloves swathed the hands. The face was concealed behind a red mask that curtained it from forehead to chin, with only 2 black eyes, like live coals, showing through eye holes. Lucifer, and to compare the grim travesty of resemblance, 2 horned red projections showed above the red skull cap that hid the man's hair. Before him, on the metal table, a thin blue flame died slowly down into a sprinkling of yellowish powder from which it had originally been born. The blue flame was the only light in the room. By its flicker could be seen 3 other men, crouching around the walls and watching the flame with breathless intensity. One of these 3 was a young man with an aristocratic but weak and degenerate face. The other 2 were creatures like gargoyles. The first was legless, with his great gorilla-like head set on tremendous shoulders coming up only to a normal man's waist. The second was a wizened small monkey of a man with bright, cruel eyes peering out from a mat of hair that covered all his features. The blue flame on the metal table died out. The red-clad figure straightened up, a gloved hand touched a switch, and the room was illuminated with red light. "Ascot Keen," said the man in Satan's costume, "has escaped the blue flame." The 3 men around the walls breathed deeply. Then the younger, with the weak face, scowled. "How do you know that, Dr. Satan?" "If the flame had consumed him," Dr. Satan said, his voice harsh and monotoned, "the blue fire would have burned red while his body was devoured." "It did not burn red." The younger man walked toward the table. He moved with a curious air of cringing defiance. The other 2 men were frankly in awe of the red-clad one. The younger man tried to throw off that awe. "How do you control the flame, Dr. Satan?" The coal-black eyes burned into his through the eye-holes in the red mask. "It is all in here," Dr. Satan said at last, pointing to an ancient roll of papyrus spread flat on a stand near the metal table. "The ingredients of the flame were compounded first in Egypt, 5,000 years ago. To these ingredients are added powdered bits of the person of the one to be consumed by the flame. Fingernail parings, hair, bits of discarded clothing, for instance. Then, when the powder is burned, the person burns. Though 1,000 miles of distance separate him from the blue fire. Yet Keen escaped," said the young man, watching Dr. Satan narrowly. "I had no bits of Keen's person to place with the chemicals. He is too shrewd to have allowed hair or nail clippings to be smuggled from his home. I had only a sliver of the chair in which he customarily sits. Obviously, he wasn't in the chair when I touched off the fire, and so escaped death." The young man lit a cigarette. The frightened defiance of his every gesture was heightened by the manner in which he lit it. The coal-black eyes, showing through the eye-holes, narrowed a little. "The death tree, Dr. Satan," the young man said. "How do you work that?" "It is a species of Australian thornbush," Dr. Satan said without hesitation. "Rather, it was, till with a certain botanical skill I altered it into a thing that flowers in 2 hours or less, rooting itself in a man's brain. The only drawback is that the seed, a tiny thing that floats in the air, must be inhaled by the victim to lodge in the nasal passage and later work its way up to the brain." "You have more seeds of this tree?" said the young man, fingers shaking as he raised the cigarette to his lips.
"Yes,"
said Dr. Satan. His manner was strange, his voice almost gentle, but there was a deadliness in the very gentleness, like the deadliness with which a cat toys with a mouse. The monkey-like little man with the hairy face and the legless giant with the huge shoulders stirred restlessly in their positions by the wall.
"Why didn't you use the flame on Ryan and Walstead and Billingsley?"
questioned the young man.
"That would have been easier than killing them with your devilish thorn bush."
"Easier," conceded the grim figure in red, "but not quite so spectacular. I wanted those three to die as fantastically as possible, so the requests I make on other rich men will be more quickly granted." A chuckle sounded from the lips under the red mask. Dr. Satan walked to the stand on which the papyrus rested. He pulled out a drawer and took from it 10 bundles of currency. In each bundle were $1,000 bills, and the band around each bundle proclaimed that each contained 100 such bills.
"The first contribution from William H. Sterling, the philanthropic manufacturer of automobiles.
$1 million. The young man stared at the heap of currency with glistening eyes. A fortune, in such small compass that it could be concealed under a man's clothes. But now, at the same time, he seemed suddenly to sense the mockery of Dr. Satan's geniality and of his apparent frankness in disclosing his affairs. Color drained from his face, and more drained from it at Dr. Satan's next words.
"You know a great deal about me, don't you, Monroe?"
Monroe swallowed painfully, then straightened his shoulders in his former frightened defiance. "Yes," he said a bit too loudly.
"I know a lot.
I know your real name.
A family name familiar to everyone in the United States. I know your philosophy of life. How you, an enormously wealthy man, tired of all the thrills that money can buy, have turned to crime. I know you as a cold-blooded monster who, under the masquerade of Dr. Satan, intends to make your crimes pay as part of your lawless game. I know how you have studied the occult and the scientific in preparation for this debut. Now I know how you controlled 2 of your murder tools, the blue flame and the tree of death."
Dr. Satan's eyes bored into Monroe's till the younger man gripped the edge of the metal table for support.
"Yes,"
he almost crooned.
"You know a lot, Monroe. More than anyone else living. You wouldn't think of betraying me, would you?"
"Not if you treat me fairly, Dr. Satan," faltered Monroe.
"But if you try to double-cross me, you are lost. In a safe deposit box, which is to be opened by my lawyer in case an accident happens to me, there's a full account of yourself."
His voice trailed off into a frightened squeak at the look in Dr. Satan's coal-black eyes. The red-clad figure appeared to loom taller and taller till it almost filled the room. And now all the defiance was gone from Monroe's posture, leaving only the fright.
"What are you going to do? What are you..."
Again his voice trailed off, but this time it ended in a thickness like that of beginning sleep. Dr. Satan's eyes, glittering, ruthless, held Monroe's eyes. Dr. Satan's hand passed slowly before Monroe's face. The monkey-like man and the legless giant watched from the wall.
"You are
asleep." Dr. Satan's voice sounded somnolently in the silent, windowless room.
"I am asleep,"
breathed Monroe, wide glassy eyes fixed on the red mask.
"You will tell me all you know, and all you hope to do." "I will tell you all I know, and all I hope to do." "What were your plans concerning me?"
For a second, Monroe's still features twisted, as though even in hypnosis his will fought to avoid answering that question. Then his lips moved mechanically.
"I was going to inform the police how to find you when you collected your next looted million. Then I was going to take the money you got from Sterling and the seeds of the death tree and the chemicals for the blue flame and collect more money myself.
It is enough,
said Dr. Satan, still in that almost gentle voice. The monkey-like man and the legless giant looked at each other. Dr. Satan had pronounced a death sentence. Dr. Satan spoke to them, eyes never leaving Monroe's face.
Gus, Bostiff.
The two moved toward Monroe. The monkey-like man, known as Gers, hopped like a deformed ape. Bostiff hitched his giant torso over the floor with his thick arms, using his calloused knuckles as feet.
The iron box, Bostiff.
Bostiff hitched his way to one wall, pushed back the sable drapes, and drew from a 3-foot niche a coffin-like box that gleamed dully in the red light. Dr. Satan's hand went out. He plucked 3 hairs from Monroe's blond head. He laid the hairs on a small pile of the yellowish powder on the metal table.
You will lie down in the box, Monroe,
he droned.
Yes, master.
The blond young man walked with jerky steps to the metal coffin and lay down in it. The lid, Bostiff.
Where am I?
Picking up the massive iron cover of the coffin as easily as though it were a pot lid, the legless giant put it on the box. Then, without further orders, he dragged the metal coffin back to its niche in the wall and slid it home in the surrounding stonework.
It's dark in here.
Dr. Satan picked up a pinch of the yellowish powder and crumbled it sharply in his fingers.
Dr. Satan?
The tiny heap on the table burst into blue flame. The 3 blonde hairs writhed and were consumed. The end of the metal coffin, showing from the niche, was suddenly red hot, then glowing with white incandescence. Slowly it faded to deep hot red in color, and back to black. Gers and Bostiff watched stolidly. If ever an investigator opened that box, nothing would be found but a pinch of ashes. A pinch of ashes that had been a man, planning to betray the master. Dr. Satan's voice sounded harshly, calmly.
Danger has been eliminated from within. Now no one on Earth knows my real identity. It remains only to eliminate danger from without.
Bostiff spoke, his dull eyes fixed on Dr. Satan's mask.
The danger from without, Master?
Dr. Satan's eyes glowed green. Yes, the danger that lies in Ascot Keen. The name crackled out in the still room. There is the only danger I recognize. The police, ludicrous. Private detectives, bodyguards hired by wealthy victims. They are but children. But in Ascot Keen lies a threat. The red-gloved hand touched the light switch. Slowly, the red bulbs faded out, bathing the room in a lowering darkness like that of a lurid, rapid sunset. But the threat of Ascot Keen is to be removed at once. Wolstead saw him. Wolstead showed him the note. Keen will act on that knowledge, and with that action he will be trapped. Pure darkness held the windowless room. In the darkness, Dr. Satan's voice concluded, Ascot Keen shall die. Then there was silence, broken only by the sound of breathing, the breathing of 2 men, Gers and Bostiff. Dr. Satan was gone. That concludes tonight's exciting episode of Dr. Satan. Tune in again next time for episode 4, Satan's Trap. Dr. Satan is copyright 2024 by Edward E. French, all rights reserved. Inquiries should be addressed to email edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. That's edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. And subscribe to the Fiction Fantastique channel, won't you? It's free. It's at www.youtube.com/French Edward 06. Edward E. French speaking. Good night.